Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday evening to you all. I hope you guys are doing well and certainly having a fantastic weekend out there so far. I know I'm coming at you a little bit earlier than I normally do for these evening videos, but I'm taking my two little girls to their very first South Carolina football game tonight. We play Furman at 7:30. If you folks don't know, I'm a big college football fan, a big South Carolina Gamecock fan. If you're a Clemson fan and tune in, no hard feelings, guys. I'm not a big trash talker, so I'm very passionate about my team, though, and I'm certainly looking forward to having a great evening with my two little girls and seeing if they enjoy it as much as their daddy does. So that's why I'm coming at you a little bit earlier than I normally do, and I just want to get the latest and greatest information out there for you folks this evening. So we'll talk about what Lee looks like right now, how he's doing out there this afternoon, this evening. We'll give you the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. We'll compare the GFS with the European model. That'll be a big segment of this video because there's been some changes. There's some windshield wiper effects going out there. One model, the GFS, for one day might show a threat to the U.S., and then the next day the GFS no longer does, and then the Euro does, and it just keeps flipping back and forth. But the Euro did something wild today, so we need to discuss that and talk about why it did what it did, and that leads us to discussing the steering currents, which we will get very detailed on that area. And that'll be an opportunity for you folks to really take in some knowledge on really what steers these tropical systems. I think it's very important for even the common public that's not interested in weather unless it's threatening them to understand what drives all these factors out here. So with that being said, if you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Thank you all for the amazing support. It seems like the videos just keep outdoing themselves, and I just thank y'all. It brings a smile to my face. It takes a lot of work, but I'm blessed to have this platform to talk about what I love, and thank y'all for giving it to me. It's really, I'm blessed. I really am. So thank y'all so much. If you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. So let's talk about Lee. Lee is still looking like a sloppy major hurricane. A major hurricane is a Category 3 or higher. There's nothing too crazy about Lee compared to what we were talking about this morning. He's maintained strength all day, still 115 mile per hour. Category 3 hurricane. There's no defined eye anymore, which there hasn't been for about a day and a half. So you really don't even know technically where the actual low-level circulation is, but more than likely it's right in here. There is still robust convection that continues to fire around that low-level circulation. You see these areas in whites and pinks. That indicates colder cloud tops, which means there is higher cloud tops, stronger updrafts. Remember, the higher up we get in the atmosphere, the colder it gets. So that is being indicated by Major Hurricane Lee. It's still being affected by shear. We expected this throughout the day. The models handled it very poorly yesterday. Okay, very, very bad. They just did not have a grip on what was going to happen, and it really took everybody by surprise. The National Hurricane Center, folks like me, folks like really anybody else. But it does seem like, and really everything points to Lee getting to an area a little bit further west than what it is right now, that he will re-strengthen, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But looking at water vapor loop, a little bit more of a broad look at this. Lee is surrounded by a lot of moist air, so it's really not being bothered by dry air or anything like that. And obviously you see the big area in white, that is Lee spinning away. Still a nice outflow, but still being affected somewhat by shear. I will be interested as we wake up tomorrow morning and do our morning video, how much better Lee looks. I think that Lee will be improving by the time we get into our Sunday. And I really think as it gets into this area of the Atlantic, when it gets well north of Puerto Rico, I think that this might reach Category 4 status again. In fact, some model guide shows this is going to re-strengthen into a Category 5 hurricane. But Lee's just maintaining strength today, just cruising. The latest information from the National Hurricane Center is 115 mile per hour storm. It's slowed down a little bit. We expect this to slow down even more, almost to a crawl at some point here in the next coming days into early next week. It's a 115 mile per hour storm. Like I said, moving at 10 miles per hour west-northwest, and just moving right along. So one thing I did not look at, and I'll do this on the fly real quick, I don't think this is going to bother the flow at all, is yes, this is a 958 millibar central pressure hurricane. So it looks like if we're basing it off millibars, it's a little bit stronger than it was this morning, but it's basically maintaining strength out there. It's no real huge difference at all. So this is Zoom Earth. This is a great way to look at the forecast intensity from one time frame to the next. It's saying that, when we get to tonight, this could strengthen another 5 miles per hour into a 120 mile per hour category 3 hurricane. By the time we're getting into tomorrow afternoon, this might be back up to a 125 mile per hour hurricane. And then by the time we get into tomorrow night, we might be talking about a category 4 hurricane again. And it has the peak intensity at 140 miles per hour sometime early next week. We'll see if this increases, but you now see the turn north. Okay, and then you see this lead beginning to weaken once it turns north as it begins to interact with a trough more than likely. We'll see what happens. And typically, when tropical systems get further north, they just enter an environment, especially the sea surface temperatures, that support weakening of these storm systems. So we'll see what happens. Some shear will likely increase with this trough to its west. So like I said, this isn't forecast to move into Florida or the southeast. I know there's people in the comments saying, you don't know what's going to happen. Well, I don't, but, really nobody does. All we can do is talk about what we think is going to happen and go from there. That's all we can do. So let's compare some model guidance. Let's take a look at the GFS first. All right, we'll start off this afternoon, and this is pretty much going to do what we think it's going to do in this region of the Atlantic right here. This will continue to move west-northwest, and we'll get into Monday morning. I think this will jog due west at some point early next week, Monday into Tuesday. If you're confused, and I feel like I should mention this a lot more, if you're confused about the time frame, because oftentimes I'll be talking 150 miles per hour, and I'll forget to mention time frames. So we're moving into the morning of the 12th. 12Z, always think of that as the morning of a day. So if it says 12Z, TUE stands for Tuesday, September 12th. That is the morning of that day. That's Zulu time. We'll go into that in a different time, but we're not going to do it right now. So Tuesday morning, this is well north of Puerto Rico, well south of Bermuda, right here. Okay, it's a powerful hurricane. I think at this point, it is re-strengthened into probably a category 4 at minimum hurricane. I really do. So this begins to feel that weakness and then turn north, and that's exactly what it does. It begins to move north. We take it to Thursday morning, and this is creeping just west of Bermuda. Okay, it really is looking like this is going to miss Bermuda, but I do think Bermuda has a chance to see some impacts, depending on how close. Obviously, the closer you are, the more hefty the impacts, but all models indicate this turn. So let's go on and flip it to this vantage point of the eastern U.S. All right, here it comes. The trough is definitely evident here. You can see where you got the green with the rain associated with the trough, cold front, and then the abrupt cutoff of precipitation, and then no precipitation right in here. This is definitely some kind of cold front. So this system on the GFS moves fast enough in off the coast of the eastern U.S. where it gets kicked off by a trough that's pretty strong over the eastern U.S. Therefore, it gets kicked on out to sea, and it does affect Nova Scotia, but it does not plow this into Nova Scotia as we're getting into Saturday of next week, a week from today. And it does end up making landfall in Nova Scotia, actually. And, initially it looks like it's going to get kicked out enough, but the ridging builds on the northeast portion of Lee enough to where this gets pushed into Nova Scotia. I think Nova Scotia, I said this a couple videos ago, if there's any place that I would say, if someone says, Mitch, you have to tell me a place is going to make landfall, I would say Nova Scotia. That's what I still say that. Okay, I could be wrong, but if I had to say one thing, if I didn't have multiple A, B, C, D options, I would say Nova Scotia. So I've seen a lot of comments from that area. First off, thank y'all for tuning in. Y'all folks in Canada are always so kind, and I really appreciate y'all. I've not ever had one negative comment from anybody in Canada once. But you got a week to prepare for this. And I'm not saying you're going to get a hurricane, but you guys have had some big storms the last couple of years, and I know that you guys will be fully prepared if this ends up coming towards your way. But, as we're getting into Saturday, next Saturday, the 17th, this is impacting you guys. Okay, we look at the Euro. What does the Euro show? Euro, same way. Don't look at the strength of this, but I do want you to watch what the Euro does with this strength. And, first off, these models are initializing way too weak, the GFS and the Euro. Okay, they always do this. Well, one thing I want you to watch, this is moving west-northwest into tomorrow, right? And then it begins to move due west, maybe a little bit tick north But look how low this number drops on the euro as we're getting into Tuesday morning and then Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday afternoon, guys, the 12th, next Tuesday, it has this dropping to a 9, 10 or lower Category 5 hurricane. The euro is saying that this environment, and we're thinking too, that's why if you look at this, it shows it re-strengthening in this area. Okay, first off, the euro thinks it'll get probably a little bit further west, but the euro is really showing that this is going to be a ripe atmosphere for explosive development, redevelopment, re-strengthening of Lee once it gets into this region. Now, I can already tell you this is going to create a lot of fear and anxiety again if this happens. Okay, but it could be off. Just like we did not see that shear that ended up affecting Lee and still is affecting Lee. This might be totally wrong, and we might just have a Category 3 hurricane right here in the Western Atlantic. But man, the euro is going bonkers with the strength of this. Okay, but eventually the euro does feel that weakness very slowly, because this is, remember, this is in 3-hour intervals. The GFS is in 6-hour intervals. So we get into Thursday morning. Here it comes. It's creeping north, and then we get into Thursday afternoon. We have a powerful Category 4 hurricane just southwest and south of Bermuda, but it's looking like it's going to miss. Now we go on and flip it at a different vantage point here in the eastern U.S., and here it comes. It's creeping north. This is Friday morning. Okay. One thing I want to note is on the euro, and I'll show you this in a second, is the trough is weakened on the euro. On the GFS, it is not weakened. It's a strong, pretty evident trough, and I'll show you that here in a second in a different way of looking at it. But one thing with this is, look at this. This is moving north, right? You're thinking, all right, this should move northeast soon. No, it moves north-northwest and looks like it's about to pull a Sandy or something. And please, when I say that, don't tell everybody that it's going to be a Sandy. I'm just saying, it makes that little infamous turn, right? But you keep this going, and we get into next Sunday afternoon. The euro is much slower than the GFS, like a day and a half, 2 days slower. But unfortunately on the euro, and I'm not saying this is a conclusion, this is just one run of the euro. It's probably going to be totally different when we wake up tomorrow morning. But we were hoping we were getting a trend out to sea. But this just tells you we have no trend right now. We are still going back and forth like windshield wipers. But this plows Lee right into southern New England next Sunday evening. Not going to lie. This is what the latest euro shows. And this affects everybody from Long Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, even areas of eastern New York State. We hope that this does not happen, because this would be a life-threatening storm. So this is what the latest euro is doing, and I'll show you guys exactly why it does this here in a second. But first off, I do want to show you guys the ensembles. This was the ensembles from last night, the OOZ. The European ensembles, which makes up 51 members of this run, and it shows most of them, starting to move out to sea. But unfortunately, even the 12Z guidance has ticked a little bit further west, and we have more members hitting Nova Scotia, and now we have a few straggler members kind of moving into the northeast. But I want to tell you is the operational euro is still an outlier compared to its ensemble. Okay, you only have like 3 members that actually 3 or 4 members to actually go and take the same route that the operational euro takes. So that's one thing to note here. But let's talk about why the euro does what it does. And actually, I feel like this will be the easiest one to explain. Hopefully I don't trip it up. If you're a new viewer and haven't been tuning into these steering currents, the orange you see out here, that is a ridge of high pressure. The blue is low pressure. Just like the blue is indicated with Lee is a low pressure, a tropical system. The blue is low pressure. It could be an upper trough. It could be a cutoff low, an upper low, whatever it may be. So we know, and I'll want to do this really quick. We know that the flow around these low pressures go like this. Okay? Just like with this low pressure, this hurricane, we know in the northern hemisphere, low pressure goes like this. This is how these tropical systems spin. Around high pressure, okay, it goes like this. Okay, right along the boundary of this ridge and this subtropical ridge of high pressure. Okay, so eventually I want you to watch as this orange area kind of disappears off your screen here. So let's go on and get this back in motion. So this is moving. So it's following the base of this subtropical ridge. That's why Lee is moving west-northwest or west for a while. Okay, but watch. First off, you notice how that one blue area disappeared. Okay, that's not going to be a factor on Lee at all. This will be a factor. This area, this huge trough, this blue area, trough of low pressure showing up here. All right, so, you know, we're thinking, oh no, the subtropical ridge is still here. This is going to end up continuing. It's going to continue to head west because the subtropical ridge is nosing in on Lee. Well, watch how it basically disappears. And this area whitens up. That is our weakness. That is our weakness. And then Lee, which is a stronger hurricane, very strong on the Euro, sniffs out that weakness. And I've said it many times over the last few days. A stronger system always wants to gain latitude. And I've had the same question showing up, and I think it's awesome. It's beautiful you guys are asking questions. That it really makes me smile, because it makes me feel better about the fact that you guys are just wanting to actually know why these systems get steered. And so that's always great. A lot of people are wondering about Margot too. Is Margot going to merge with Lee? Is this going to influence the track? As of now, I don't think that's the case. If that ends up becoming something that keeps showing up on models, I will talk about that scenario, but I just don't think that's going to happen. So I'm not going to mention it right now. Okay, but Lee's right here. It sees this weakness in white. Same time, you got a pretty deep digging trough, which, by the way, will be the same trough that delivers some cooler temperatures for the eastern U.S. next week. Okay, this is a trough with an associated cold front. Normally, cold fronts, remember, are what kick out these tropical systems. A little tidbit of information here. A lot of people don't realize on September 11, 2001, there was a hurricane right off the coast of Long Island. Of course, it was, I say right off the coast, but it was further off the coast to the point where no impacts were made. A cold front was actually pushing, I think it was Hurricane Aaron, I believe, pushing Hurricane Aaron away. If you actually look at a broad view of the satellite during 9/11, of course, unfortunately, you see the smoke coming from the Twin Towers, but there was a hurricane right off the coast. And if you remember on that day on 9/11, the skies were blue, not a cloud in the sky. And it was because a cold front had just worked through, and that was the same cold front that was ultimately pushing that hurricane out to sea. Not sure if you knew that. Now you do. But Lee begins to feel this weakness here. Okay, this subtropical ridge begins to kind of move north enough. All right, and unfortunately what happens here is with the Euro, this trough weakens. Okay, this weakens on the Euro, and it kind of just dissipates, and it's not really a factor. So Lee, basically, this trough basically misses Lee. It's not really picked up with it. Lee is moving slow, and it kind of meanders in this weakness for a period of time. And because on the GFS, which is what I'm about to show you, the GFS shows a giant trough that's basically sitting here. Okay, but on the Euro, the trough really weakens. It's not extended down here. And what we do know is we back it up. If this trough was the main amplified right here, we would know that this would probably be trying to kick Lee on out to sea. Okay, this would help to push this steering current, and hopefully would push Lee kind of out here if this ridge was to keep on moving this way. It's not the case. Not the case on the latest Euro. We keep this going here, and that trough of low pressure begins to disappear. In fact, it just totally gets absorbed, and not really absorbed is the right word, but it basically just weakens. And then what happens here is ridging builds on top of Lee. Okay, so Lee, being a strong hurricane, is going to fight against that ridge very hard, right? But if you literally have ridging building right on top of Southeast Canada like this, it's not going to be able to just plow right into this. It'll move against it, but it's still going to feel the steering current. So you notice Lee is moving north right here next weekend, and then it nudges north-northwest. It's because, remember what I just talked about, the flow around ridge, a ridge of high pressure, it goes like this. So it doesn't mean that Lee's just going to directly get steered right into New Jersey, right? No, this is going to continue to fight for latitude, but it's going to have a hard time doing so. So ultimately, with this building high right over Canada, all right, and the missing of the trough, you got another trough building down here, but it just ain't going to get here in time off this run. Okay, this is just one run of the Euro. But this is why we re-go over all these scenarios. I want you to see the players out here and why the runs do change from run to run. Okay, so this is ultimately why Lee doesn't try to hit Nova Scotia instead this, look at this ridge. You see this really orange, almost red area. This is a very strong high pressure, and this is going to just get basically shoved into southern New England. That's exactly what happens. And another trough comes down, but it just does not dig down fast enough. So why does the GFS go out to sea? Well, we'll be able to just work through this really easily because it's quite simple. Here it comes, same kind of pattern, subtropical ridge, making Lee move west-northwest. This opening right here opens up, right? It begins to feel that weakness, and here it comes. And you can already tell this is already being influenced in the troughing right here in blue, right? So it does not miss the trough. Yes, the trough does weaken on the GFS, but it doesn't miss it. It flat out misses it on the European, even though the European, the trough is weakening too, substantially. And even on the GFS is what I meant to say, is weakening too. It does not miss it. So in general, Lee just moves faster on the GFS and is able to get picked up by this trough. And at the same time, you don't have a building ridge over this region right here like you did the GFS, like you did the European. Okay, you have a building ridge over here, and it's positioning itself a little bit east of Lee, which you don't want to see, and it's just enough to where this goes right into Nova Scotia. Now, look, this ridge builds in right at the last second. Look how it builds on top of it. So this does make Lee go right into Nova Scotia and eventually gets absorbed into the ridge, and a big deep trough begins to show up later on the GFS. So I hope that makes sense. You know, both troughs weaken, right? So this trough comes in and affects it enough to where it kicks it further away from Maine, but it still hits Nova Scotia. So, you know, in general, that's kind of what's going on. You know, so you can tell, you know, here comes Lee. Lee flat out misses the trough. It just misses it. There it goes. And then ridging pretty much dominates Lee after that. So it's a mixture between Lee missing the trough and a weakening trough. Okay, so not only does we have to watch for, you know, Lee being slower. If Lee is slower, it's not good. But you have to watch to see how fast this trough of low pressure in the blue, which is not this one, it's this one right here. How fast does it weaken? How fast does it make itself not a factor? So I hope that makes sense. We'll continue to do it and do it and do it until we really figure out what's going to happen with Lee. God bless all y'all. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you in the morning.